Hello and welcome to Democracies of the World, our show on Sansad TV, where we take you through the latest happenings from parliaments across the globe. In today's episode, we will talk about how leftist Workers' Party leader Lula da Silva made a historic comeback by beating a sitting president in Brazil. In the next half an hour, we'll also take a look at the elections in major democracies of the world. I'm your host, Bhavna Nair. Let's begin our show with Israel elections. Former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is on a course to win Israel's election. This was the country's fifth general election in less than 4 years. Pro-Netanyahu parties are projected to win as many as 65 seats in the 120-seat parliament. The alliance comprised Netanyahu's Likud party, Religious Zionism, Jewish Power, Sahas, and United Torah Judaism. In Israel's fragmented politics, no single party has ever won a parliamentary majority, and a coalition building is necessary to govern. Netanyahu's main rival in the election was the man who helped oust him last year, the centrist caretaker Yair Lapid. Israelis voted on November 1 for an unprecedented fifth time in 4 years to break the political impasse that has paralyzed the country. The votes seem to have been influenced largely by two factors, including right-wing polarization and the prospect of veteran politician Netanyahu leading the coalition. Moving on, Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen was in a strong position to remain in power after her Social Democrats won the most votes in Denmark's election held this week, and a centre-left bloc in parliament that backs appeared set to retain a majority by just one seat. Take a look.
Denmark's centre-left has secured the most votes in a general election, widely seen as a confidence vote in the country's leader. Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen's red bloc of parties has secured the required 90 seats to form a government. Her Social Democrats party unexpectedly gained 2 seats and secured its best result in 2 decades. Frederiksen was forced to call an early election in October. It followed outrage after a highly critical report of her government's handling of a countrywide mink cull at 4 farms at the height of the pandemic was released over the summer. The cull and chilling images of mass graves of minks have haunted Frederiksen since 2020 and eventually led to cracks in the centre-left bloc. The Social Democrats remained Denmark's top party with 28% support. There were also suggestions that if neither group won a majority, the decision as to which country would govern would end up in the hands of the recently formed Moderates Party, led by 2-time former Prime Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen. Before the election, Frederiksen floated the idea of a broader alliance that would also include opposition parties, but was rebuffed by opposition leaders. Denmark's more than 4 million voters had to choose among over 1,000 candidates, the most ever from 14 parties. Concerns about rising inflation and energy prices linked to Russia's war in Ukraine and a shortage of nurses in the public healthcare system were key themes in election campaigns. Unlike in previous elections, immigration received little attention. Frederiksen, who became Denmark's youngest prime minister when she took office at 41 more than 3 years ago, teamed up with the opposition to hike NATO member Denmark's defense spending in the wake of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Her steadfast leadership during the COVID-19 pandemic was partly overshadowed by the mink culling episode.
And it's a comeback of the century. At national elections on October 30th, Brazilian voters delivered a narrow victory for Lula Inácio Lula da Silva, a beloved but controversial leftist former president. The former union leader took 50.9% against 49.1% for Jair Bolsonaro, the right-wing incumbent. Meanwhile, Bolsonaro's supporters take to the streets across Brazil in response to election results. Take a look.
Brazil has taken a turn to the left as former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva beat far-right incumbent Jair Bolsonaro in the presidential election. Lula won 50.9% of the votes. It was enough to beat Jair Bolsonaro, whose supporters had been confident of victory.
e que hoje tem único e grande vencedor, o povo brasileiro. Esta não é uma vitória minha nem do PT, nem dos partidos que me apoiaram nessa campanha. É a vitória de um imenso movimento democrático que se formou acima dos partidos políticos.
It is a stunning comeback for Lula da Silva, who could not run in the last presidential election in 2018 because he was in jail and banned from standing for office. That vote was won by Bolsonaro, who used the presidency to promote conservative social values while also delivering incendiary speeches and testing democratic institutions. Lula spent 580 days in jail before his conviction was annulled and he returned to the political fray. While Bolsonaro has lost, lawmakers close to him won a majority in Congress. This means that Lula will face stiff opposition to his policies in the legislative body when he takes office on 1st of January. But Lula, who served 2 terms in office between January 2003 and December 2010, is no stranger to forging political alliances. In his victory speech, Lula struck a conciliatory tone, saying he would govern for all Brazilians and not just those who voted for him. He also vowed to reinstate the monitoring of the Amazon. But at the heart of his speech was a promise to tackle hunger, which has been on the rise in Brazil and which is affecting more than 33 million. Key to Lula's popularity during his first 2 terms in office was lifting millions of Brazilians out of poverty.
Vamos retomar o monitoramento e a vigilância da Amazônia e combater toda e qualquer atividade ilegal, seja garimpo, mineração, extração de madeira ou ocupação agropecuária indevida.
Meanwhile, congratulations poured in from leaders around the world. Prime Minister Narendra Modi said he looked forward to deepening ties with Brazil. UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said he looked forward to working together on issues from growing the global economy to protecting the planet's natural resources and promoting democratic values. US President Joe Biden noted that the result came following free, fair and credible elections. Russian President Vladimir Putin said the results had confirmed Lula's impressive political authority. Bureau Report, Sansad TV.
Left leader Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, a former factory worker and Brazil's first working-class president, scripts an astonishing political comeback as he beats far-right incumbent Jair Bolsonaro in the Brazil elections. Here is all you need to know about him.
Lula da Silva, also known as Lula, became Brazil's first working-class president in 2002 but stepped down after 2 terms in 2010. Even then, he was extremely popular with approval ratings close to 90%. His Workers' Party or PT after that was found embroiled in corruption scandals and accused of plunging Brazil into a brutal recession. Owing to corruption charges, Lula was jailed in 2018 and barred from running in that year's election, which Jair Bolsonaro went on to win. Lula's 580-day imprisonment ended in late 2019 as his convictions were quashed on the grounds that he was unfairly tried by a right-wing judge. In May this year, Lula, who first sought the presidency in 1989, announced his 6th presidential run, vowing to beat Jair Bolsonaro by staging the greatest peaceful revolution the world has ever seen. A charismatic politician, Lula is a powerhouse of the American left. He was born on October 27, 1945, to illiterate farmhands. The family moved to Sao Paulo when he was 7. In the 1970s, Lula joined the labor movement. Lula's political career started in 1980 when he founded the left-wing Workers' Party. He first ran for office in 1982 to become the governor of Sao Paulo but lost. Lula launched his first bid to become Brazil's working-class president in 1989, but it was unsuccessful. He lost 2 presidential bids in 1994 and 1998 before finally becoming successful in 2002. Under his tenure, Lula helped Brazil secure the 2014 World Cup and 2016 Olympics. During his time, Brazil enjoyed an economic boom triggered by an uptick in the global demand of commodities, and his time in office is remembered for massive social welfare programs that lifted millions out of poverty. Bureau Report, Sunset TV.
Now moving on to another story, new British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak chaired his first cabinet meeting in 10 Downing Street this week after Interior Minister Suella Braverman faced heavy criticism for describing the arrival of asylum seekers as an invasion. Her comments came a day after a man used fire bombs to attack an immigration processing centre in the port town of Dover before killing himself. Braverman told Parliament that she was working to stop the invasion on our southern coast in reference to the arrival of migrants in small boats across the Channel from France. Braverman was reappointed Interior Minister by new Prime Minister Rishi Sunak last week, 6 days after she resigned from the same role under former Prime Minister Liz Truss for breaching ministerial rules by sending a sensitive government document via her personal email. Meanwhile, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak defended the government's handling of Channel migrants after coming under pressure to tackle deteriorating conditions at a processing centre in southeast England. Sunak, speaking at Prime Minister's questions in the House of Commons, said that Channel crossings was a serious and escalating problem.
What I can say is a significant action that the Home Secretary has taken to fix the issue. Since September, 30 more hotels with 4,500 new beds, appointing a senior general to control the situation at Manston, and indeed increasing the number of staff there by almost a half, Mr. Speaker. These are significant steps to demonstrate that we are getting a grip of this system. But this is a serious and escalating problem. We will make sure that we control our borders, and we will always do it fairly and compassionately because that's the right thing.
Slipping into a very short break here, you stay tuned to Sunset TV for more news on democracies of the world. Welcome back after the break. You're watching our special program, Democracies of the World. Malaysia's opposition leader Anwar Ibrahim unveiled an election platform focusing on bolstering economic growth and good governance on Wednesday. With the slogan, "We Can," Anwar appealed to voters to give his alliance of hope a victory in November 19 polls so that it is stable and can carry out proposed reforms. Malaysia's Election Commission announced recently that national elections will be held on November 19. Prime Minister Ismail Sabri Yaakob dissolved Parliament on October 10 for early polls, ignoring protests from his government allies and the opposition for holding a vote in the monsoon season. Parliament's term expires in July 2023, but his United Malays national organisation is feuding with allies in the ruling coalition and believes early voting in his favour. UMNO is banking on a strong win on its own based on a return of support from ethnic Malays and a fragmented opposition before an expected economic softening next year.
Yeah, for now we are leading. I think there is general consensus that Pakatan Harapan as a coalition is leading. What I can do is to appeal particularly to the fence-sitters to give us this mandate so that we are not given ultimatum threats post-elections. So that we are free then to guide this country and save this country from endemic corruption and abuse of power.
And now news from Lebanon. Lebanese President Michel Aoun left the presidential palace last week, marking the end of his 6-year term without a replacement. His exit left the small nation in a political vacuum that is likely to worsen its historic economic meltdown. As Aoun's term ends, the country is being run by a caretaker government after Prime Minister-designate Najib Mikati failed to form a new cabinet following May 15 parliamentary elections.
Lebanon embarked on an uncertain political future on October 30th after President Michel Aoun left office without a successor. During Aoun's term in office, Lebanon experienced several crises From mass protests to the deadly 2020 blast at a Beirut port to the country's severe financial crisis, the Mediterranean country now only has a caretaker government with limited powers, raising concerns about further political turmoil. Due to deep divisions in Lebanon's political parties, no successor to the president has been named. Lawmakers have tried and failed 4 times in the past months to elect a new president. Aoun warned that weeks of constitutional chaos lay ahead for the country. Hundreds of supporters took to the streets to bid the president farewell. They waved flags and held large portraits of the outgoing head of state. In his final week in the palace, Aoun signed onto a US-mediated deal delineating Lebanon's southern maritime border with Israel. Prior to leaving the presidential palace, Aoun sharply criticized the country's judiciary and central bank governor, saying they were to blame for the country's financial crisis. Lebanese are deeply divided over Aoun, a former army commander, with some seeing him as a defender of the country's Christian community and a leading figure who tried to seriously fight corruption in Lebanon. His opponents criticize him for his role in the 1975 to 1990 civil war and for his shifting alliance, especially with the Iran-backed Hezbollah, the country's most powerful military and political force. Parliament has held 4 sessions since late September to elect a president, but no candidate was able to get the 2/3 majority of the vote needed. As in previous votes, parliamentary blocs will have to agree on a consensus candidate for the country's top post, as no alliance within the legislature controls majority seats. Under Lebanon's power-sharing agreement, the president has to be a Maronite Christian, the parliament speaker a Shiite, and the prime minister a Sunni Muslim. Bureau Report, Sansad TV.
Latvia's new parliament assembled for its first session on Tuesday to swear in lawmakers and elect leaders in a televised ceremony. Edward Smaltans of the United List became the new parliament speaker with 82 votes in favour and 11 votes against. Meanwhile, his rival Alexei Roskilovs of Stability was supported by the 11 members of his party, but 82 MPs voted against him. Smaltans' victory was predictable since the United List, along with New Unity and the National Alliance, is likely to become a partner in Latvia's next government coalition. Zanda Kalina Lukashevika of New Unity and Janis Grasbergs of the National Alliance were elected vice speakers of the Latvian parliament. Prime Minister Krišjānis Kariņš' New Unity party came out in the lead in the parliament election on October 1 and is currently holding talks with the United List and the National Alliance to form the Baltic countries' new government coalition. And that's all we have in this edition of our program Democracies of the World. Connect with us on various social media platforms for all the latest from around the world. Thank you for staying in. Stay tuned for more informative programs on Sansad TV. Till then, goodbye. Namaskar.